Hello everyone, welcome back to the review you've been looking for. My name is Kyle. I'm going to be your host, as always, here. Welcome to episode 2, where we're going to be reviewing Empire Strikes Back today for Star Wars in Review. If you've seen the first episode, A New Hope, thank you for joining me. If this is your first time, please go check out the other content I have. As of right now, we have Mr. Robot in review. We have A New Hope, first episode of Star Wars in Review. Marvel MCU is coming soon. That's not up there yet, but just wait. And then we also have John Wick in review. Wick Watch is finished. So please check out the content. I love all the support that everyone's given me so far. It's been a blast making all of the content so far. So Star Wars, I love, really near and dear to my heart. So again, thank you for joining me, and we're going to jump right in. Okay, so tonight we are reviewing Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. And I know this is kind of a fan favorite for a lot of people. I think a lot of people put Empire at the top, and they don't think anything can really touch it there. So we'll see if I share those opinions or if I differ from those. We're going to go into that. But may the plot be with you. So we get the opening crawl here, as we did in New Hope. And it says, "It is a dark time for the rebellion. Although the Death Star has been destroyed, Imperial troops have driven the rebel forces from their hidden base and pursued them across the galaxy. Evading the dreaded Imperial Starfleet, a group of freedom fighters led by Luke Skywalker has established a new secret base on the remote ice world of Hoth," which is the first world we're going to see here. The evil Lord Darth Vader, obsessed with finding young Skywalker, has dispatched thousands of remote probes into the far reaches of space. And that is the opening crawl. We get a pan down to a Star Destroyer setting out the aforementioned probes there that look kind of like meteorites, and they go down to the ice world Hoth there, and a bunch of them fly into the snow. We get Luke riding a tauntaun, which is kind of like a camel in the snow, I guess, but a cool little Star Wars sci-fi animal there. Now, a famous animal, basically, in the sci-fi universe. So Luke is riding a tauntaun, and he's wearing like the dopest snow gear you'll ever see. Just like really cool. They nailed the costume design on this. Kind of reminds me of what we're gonna see in Jedi. Really cool snow gear here from Luke, where he's got his goggles on. He takes off the goggles and he looks around. So Luke radios into Han, and he says, "Hey, no signs of life forms here," but he's like, "There's a meteorite that just crashed down. I'm gonna go check it out. Won't take long." So Luke is then immediately attacked by Bumble, the abominable snowman from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I don't know the real name for this creature, but it's like a big yeti, and it looks a lot like Bumble. So I'm just gonna call him Bumble for this review. So Bumble attacks Luke, he knocks him out, and he drags him off screen. Han then arrives back at the base on Hoth there, where he's like, "Yo, where's Luke at?" He's like, "Anybody seen Luke?" And they're like, "Well, he hasn't checked in yet. He was going to check out the meteorite activity, but, we haven't seen him show up yet." Han goes over to kind of the navigation, or the guy running the navigation, and the guy actually says, all this meteorite, which is just the probes that the Empire's sending. He says it's going to be hard to track incoming chips, so that's a good little bit there. Han says, I got to bounce, I got to go pay Jabba, he's got a price on my head, and he gives Leia a good look here, and they have a really cute flirty argument scene in the corridor there. Han's like, "I got to go." He's like, "So long, Your Highness," and she's like, Han, "We need you," and Han says, "We need you." He goes, "Well, what about you?" And she says, "No, yeah, you're a great fighter." He's like, "Oh yeah, that's why you want to keep me." He's like, "Why don't you just admit how you feel about me?" And she's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he's like, "Yeah, well, maybe I could use a kiss." And he goes off, or they mentioned something about a kiss here. Sorry, I'm butchering this line. And then off screen, Han kind of yells into the camera, and he says, "I could use a good kiss." So Han goes over to the Falcon, where he runs into Chewie, 3PO, and R2-D2, kind of the gang here, and Chewie's taking apart the ship. Han's acting a bit abrasive here. He kind of yells at Chewie, And he's like, "Why are you taking that apart now?" He's like, "I'm trying to leave. I'm trying to leave. Like I'm trying to go back to Jabba." And C3PO brings up the fact that nobody knows where Luke is, and Han's like, "What do you mean nobody knows?" And then a deckhand comes over, and he's like, "Well, he should have arrived at the southern corridor, or like one of the other corridors." And Han's like, "Well, why don't you go find out for me?" And then the guy goes and checks, and he comes back, and he's like, "Yeah, Luke hasn't checked in." And so Han's like, "All right, I'm just gonna go do it myself then." And he's like, "I'm gonna go take the Tauntaun out." The guy says, "Your Tauntaun will freeze before morning," and he goes, "I'll see you in hell." So we cut back to Luke hanging upside down. Pretty famous shot here where Luke is hanging upside down. Bumble has put him up there. He's devouring another human or some sort of creature in the background. Looks like Luke is done for. We get the iconic scene where his lightsaber is just out of reach and he can't reach it, but he closes his eyes and he focuses. He uses the Force to pull the lightsaber to him, cuts himself down, and then cuts off Bumble's arm. But as far as we know, he leaves Bumble to live, so good for Luke for not being a heartless monster. And Luke runs out of the storm, but the storm is really bad now, so he just stumbles a few feet before he's exhausted. And before he passes out, he actually gets Ghost Obi-Wan. And he says, Luke still calls him Ben, and I thought that was kind of weird, but I guess he knows him as Ben, so. But Obi-Wan tells him, "Luke, you need to go to the Dagobah system and train with Master Yoda." Luke's like, "I don't know what any of that means, but okay." And then he passes out. And then, right after that, Obi-Wan disappears and Han shows up. And Han finds him, cuts open the Tauntaun who, just died. And he says, "It's not going to smell bad, but this will keep you warm until I can put up the shelter." And he's just kind of talking to himself because Luke is not conscious right now or not really knowing what's going on. But there's a great line here where Han says, "I thought they smelled bad on the outside." So the next morning, Rogue 2 finds them. And now, of course, we have the movie Rogue One, which is one of my favorite movies. And so that was really cool that Rogue 2 is coming out here, which is, again, a great bit that we were able to go back, or Lucasfilm was able to go back and make a movie. Rogue One, Rogue 2 was here. Nice little scene. But they find the rescuing party there. So back at the base, we get a recovering Luke, who goes into a hyperbolic time chamber, for any DBZ fans out there, for a little bit, and he heals up. Han is kind of giving Leia a hard time here. He's kind of flirting with Leia, trying to play hard to get, and he's like, "Oh, I guess you don't want to get rid of a handsome guy like me, huh?" And Leia's kind of pissed off there. She's getting mad. And Han says, "I must have hit pretty close to the mark." He's like, "You should have seen us in the South Corridor. Express her true feelings to me." And then Leia says, "You don't know the first thing about women." And then she leans in and she kisses Luke. And Luke's feeling himself after this. He leans back in his chair and he just kind of looks at Han. And Han's kind of pissed off now. And it kind of harkens back to the first movie, New Hope, where they have this nice scene in the Falcon, the cockpit of the Falcon, where he's like, "Well, you think a princess would go for a guy like me?" And Luke's like, "No." And it's they're kind of still chasing the same girl, and Luke kind of backs off in this one. But Leia kisses him, and he's like, "Maybe I do have a shot here." And so that makes Han jealous, and there's a fun kind of love triangle going on between them for a bit. So the rebels finally figure out that the Empire's probe droid has found them, and they're like, "We got to get out of here. Let's start the evacuation." And hello, the Imperial March. The Imperial March, amazingly, is not in A New Hope, so it was introduced for this movie, and this is some of the most iconic music in cinema history. So good. The Imperial March is Darth Vader's theme, or really anytime the Emperor shows up. The dun 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 dun. I mean, anyone who's seen Star Wars or even hasn't seen Star Wars, I'm sure they've heard it somewhere. It's some of the most famous music ever. And it's so good, it rips every time. So there's a great scene of Han trying to fix the Falcon, and Chewie's trying to fix it, and he says, "Okay, start it up." And it starts sparking, and he goes, "Turn it off, turn it off." And then we get our first Vader egg scene, where he's in this egg, I don't know if it will It's probably playing on one of these back here, but there's like a capsule that he's in where he hides himself, and we later find out that like it's his head that's all messed up, and he hides in like this egg so that no one knows about him, but he doesn't time it very well, or it's like a slow rotation because the Admiral will walk in on him a couple times and see. But this is cool because it's like a really cool kind of futuristic looking thing, but Vader, we guess, is like kind of his cubicle where he hangs out between missions, or I don't know what it is, but it's a cool looking shot. And this is also the scene where we get Vader, he's got like a monitor, and he's talking to the Admiral where they're like, we can't find the rebellion. And he goes, you have failed me for the last time, Admiral. And he force chokes the dude through the TV. Force choking someone would not even be in the same room. Badass, and it speaks to how powerful Vader is with the Force. And thus begins the Battle of Hoth. So the rebels say, the ion cannon will take out the Star Destroyer, or at least one Star Destroyer, so that we can get away in a transport. So the ion cannon does that. It does take out a Star Destroyer. There's like kind of an awkward motion where it just kind of like juts to the left, but the times were different then, so it still looks really good for its time. And the first transport is away, but Vader's coming for that ass. And this is where we get the debut of the AT-ATs. And the AT-ATs stand for the All-Terrain Armored Transport, which I never remember. But the AT-ATs are the big walking things. Really, really cool. There's a line here that says the armor is too strong for the lasers for the rebel ships, but eventually Wedge uses the harpoon. One of the fighters uses the harpoon cable to take down that bitch, and he kind of goes around and iconic scene where the AT-AT falls to the ground there, and then they shoot it and it blows up. So Luke's ship gets shot down, and if his co-pilot wasn't dead before when they crashed, we don't know if he's unconscious or dead. He's definitely dead now because an AT-AT steps. Luke gets away at the last second, but AT-AT steps right on their ship and just crushes it. So that dude that was sitting behind Luke, 100% dead. So Luke fires a grappling hook up underneath one of the other AT-ATs, and he uses his lightsaber to cut a hole open, and he throws a grenade up there, and that just like wrecks the whole AT-AT. Somehow the grenade he threw in like makes explosions in the back of the AT-AT and also the head of the AT-AT, so it just like blows the whole thing up, which was cool. Just I don't know how a grenade would do that much damage for seemingly these big AT-ATs, but we'll forget what we know. So Vader arrives at the base finally, but luckily Han, Leia, Chewie, and 3PO hop onto the Falcon. Han's like, yo, this baby's got a few surprises left in her, because Leia makes a line that she's like, this bucket of bullets isn't going to save us, and Han's like, hey, don't be so fast to judge her. Luke sees the Falcon leave, then he hops into his X-Wing where he tells R2 that he runs shit, and he's like, hey, we're going to Dagobah, because R2's like, oh, where are you going? In his beeps and his boops. And Luke is like, I know we're not going to meet up with the others for the rendezvous. He's like, we're going to go to Dagobah. And he's like, don't worry, R2, it's good. It's all good. And he's like, I'm old enough to make my own decisions, R2. And he's like, it's okay, I like manual control. And then he goes off to Dagobah while the others take off in the Falcon. But I don't think Luke tells the rest of the group this, or they didn't really have much time because the Empire's coming, but they basically have no idea what happened to Luke, other than he should be rendezvousing and he's not. So we find out here that though the Falcon is not out of the weeds just yet, and they're being chased by 3 Star Destroyers and some TIE fighters. And guess what? It turns out the hyperdrive is broken, so they can't jump to light speed. Han says we gotta navigate through this asteroid field. 3PO says, sir, the odds of properly navigating an asteroid field are, and he puts like this ridiculous number, and this is where we get the great line from Han where he says, never tell me the odds. And there's a really, really great movie shot here of the Falcon flying all the way up through the screen and down into a dark hole in the ground, because they say we gotta take shelter somewhere, like the Empire, there's nowhere to go and the Empire's everywhere, so they find like a deep crevice and they go down there. Luke and R2 arrive at Dagobah, or should I say they crash into Dagobah, because Luke is like, I can't see anything, and then it's foggy, and then he just like he like nosedives right into the swamp. We get Vader's egg scene part 2 between this, where we actually do get to see Vader's helmet go on, and the Admiral walks in again, and he's like, "Man, I told you to knock. Like, why you keep coming in?" It's like, or he's like, "I got to adjust how quickly these things go down, like a garage door that just slowly goes down." But we get to see the back of Vader's head where it's really, really badly damaged, which at this point we don't know why that happened because the prequels were out at this point. But and then we'll see that again next movie. Spoilers, more of Vader's face. But right now we just get the back of his head really, really severely burned, and you're like, oh. Like, at the time, this was only the second movie of Star Wars, and you're like, what's going on with Vader? We thought he was just, like, a machine, and I guess the poor pun, I guess he is kind of a machine, but, yeah, this is good because we get to see how deteriorated and kind of broken down he is on the inside. So we cut back to the Falcon. There's a really good scene where 3PO says, "Sir," there's a couple big shakes, and they're kind of going around the ship. 3PO says, "Sir, it's entirely possible this asteroid is not entirely stable." And then Han says, "Not entirely stable." He goes, "I'm so glad you're here to tell us these things." And he goes, "Chewie, take the professor in the back and hook him up to the hyperdrive." It's like, thanks, Captain Obvious. So there's another big shake, and Leia falls into Han's arms here, and she's like, let go of me. And he's like, all right, don't get too excited. And she goes, "Being held by you isn't enough to get me excited." And he goes, "Sorry, sweetheart, there wasn't time for anything else." And I'm like, Han, you sly dog. And it's just that fun, flirty nature that Han and Leia have throughout the whole movie that starts to really build their relationship. So we go back to Luke on Dagobah, and he's like, okay, now I gotta find Yoda, if he even exists. And there's a cool shot of him and R2. R2's all in the swamp, he's all muddy because I think he falls into the water before he comes out, and Luke is like, what are we doing here, huh? And then we get creepy Yoda. Yoda shows up, and I gotta be honest, this part of Yoda, this was an interesting design choice, or creative choice, I should say, because the Yoda at the beginning, this Yoda sucks, and we find out he's 800 years old or so. But this Yoda is like a child, and he's like really creepy, and he's like stealing Luke's like candy and shit, or his food. And like, I just put in my notes here, like, Yoda sucks in this part of the movie. Like, Yoda's terrible. I don't know why they didn't. I think they should have just made him the same serious character that we see later on in the movie, but they made him like super goofy, and he like fights with R2, and he's like pulling it back and forth with R2, and he like hits R2 with the stick, and it's like, I know Yoda's been on Dagobah for who knows how long, but for like a Jedi Master, he acts like a little bitch, frankly, and he's like really weird. But the puppet design is great, so Yoda does look a little different in this movie, but he does look pretty good. So we go back to Han and Leia, and Han's like, just admit that you like me. And she's kind of tinkering with something on the ship there, and Han kind of grabs her hands, and he starts like rubbing her hands. And she says, maybe a little. She's like, when you're not acting like a scoundrel. And he's like, a scoundrel? He's like, ooh, I kind of like the sound of that. And she's like, stop it, what are you doing? And like Han's like getting closer, and they kiss, and they're holding it for a bit there, and then 3PO comes in and just cock blocks him. And he's like, I've fixed the hyperdrive. And Han's like, great. Like, he's like, thanks, dude. But like, he's like, we're in the middle of something right here, and it's a good comedic break for C-3PO, but he just comes right in the middle of like a romantic moment, and Han's like, cool, I told you to fix the hyperdrive, and he's like, then I kind of forgot about it, but thanks a lot, dude. So we cut back to Vader's ship, where Vader says, we need to get out of this asteroid field so we can send a clean signal and sweep the area. They must be around here somewhere. And this is when Vader hits up the Emperor with Skype. Not really, but it's a hologram. And this is a really, really cool scene. This is the first time we see the Emperor. Vader gets on one knee, and we get this shot. The Emperor tells Vader that young Skywalker is his kid, or the son of Anakin Skywalker. And he says, how can that be? And he says, search your feelings, you will know it to be true. And then the Emperor says, he can destroy us. We cannot let Luke become a Jedi Master. But if he can be turned, he can be a powerful ally. And Vader says, it will be done. He says he will join us or die. And so we're going to cut back to Luke on Dagobah. So he's eating Yoda's food here in his little hut, and he says, how far away is Yoda? And why can't we see him right now? And Yoda's like, you got to be patient. And he's like, dude, I don't want to be patient. He's like, just take me to Master Yoda, will you? And then Yoda kind of sits there and he's like, dude, I can't with this kid. Like, this kid wants to be a Jedi Master, and like, this is like the one you told me about. This kid sucks. He's a little brat. He's going to Tashi Station to get some power converters. But yeah, no, Yoda is like, man, I can't train this kid. He has no patience. And that's when we get Ghost Obi-Wan, but so that Luke and Yoda can hear it. And this is where Luke is like, oh, maybe I was underestimating this dude. He says, he has no patience. Obi-Wan says, he will learn patience. He's like, think about when you first trained me, like I was the same way. And Luke is like, oh my God, it's you. He's like, you're Yoda. He's like, why didn't you just tell me that the first time? He says, Luke has too much anger in him, like his father. And eventually Yoda just says, you know what, okay, I'll train you. Luke says, good, I'm not afraid. And then there's a really creepy scene where Yoda goes, you will be. And then there's like a comedic, it's not a comedic pause, but I laughed at it because it's so weird and creepy, where he says, you will be. And then he goes, you will be. And it's like, is Yoda the villain now? It's like, what's happening? Like, why are you being weird like that, Yoda? But I think it's just a motivational thing. I don't know. So we get back to the Falcon where the creepiness continues, where we get a bunch of Minocs and their face-sucking abilities. And this shit is terrifying. Where Leia's in the cockpit and the Minoc goes on there and it's like that classic horror, like there's teeth and it's like an oval mouth. And it gives off a screech and she's like, what is that? And Han goes out there, he shoots it, he's like, oh, it's just Minocs. He's like, they're chewing on the power cables. He's like, we'll take care of everything out here. And there's like another shake there. They realize when they go out there, they're like, there's a lot of moisture in the air. And she's like, yeah, the ground feels weird. It doesn't feel like it's solid. And then Han goes, wait a minute. And he shoots the floor. And then there's another shake. And he's like, and Han figures it out. And he's like, we got to get out of here. And they get back in the Falcon. And then eventually there's a great scene where they shoot out at the last second with the teeth closing. And it's like a big creature on the asteroid where, similar to the Sarlacc pit that we'll see next movie, they get out at the last second and it chews at them. Really, really cool scene. So we go back to Yoda and Luke again, what I like to call the backpack scene. Where they're training and he's kind of running around and Yoda's on his back and he's doing flips and stuff. This is where their training actually gets going. Yoda tells him, the Jedi use the Force for knowledge, the dark side uses it to attack. Luke says, is the dark side stronger? And Yoda's like, no, the dark side's not stronger. He's like, don't believe what you hear. So there's a dark cave here, and Luke says, what's in there? And Yoda's like, why don't you go find out? And he's like, but don't worry about your weapons. You can leave your weapons here. Luke goes in there and he sees a vision of Vader here, but he fights off Vader with his lightsaber. But I thought Yoda told him not to bring his weapons, so that part was confusing. But he blows off the head of Vader, who's it's like a robotic Vader, and it turns out that it's Luke's face looking back at him. Really cool what they were going for here, that if Luke continues down this anger path, or if he goes to the dark side, he will become like Vader. But this scene is so awkward because it's this weird slow-mo, and it's just not, it's just weird how Vader kind of pops out, and it's not really explained that well. And then he I don't know, I didn't love this scene, but I like the idea of it. So we go back to the Falcon where the Empire finds Han. He flies really close there, and then all of a sudden they're like, we don't know where the Falcon is. And they're like, he's not on the radar anymore. And they're like, well, search the area, they got to be around here somewhere. There's also a great bit there where the Empire says, that's impossible, no ship that small has a cloaking device. So that's the first we hear about cloaking devices and what ships can and can't have them. Just a little bit there, but it's a cool insight into the world. So we go back to Luke and Yoda on Dagobah again. And this is where we get the line where Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try. And he tells Luke to lift his X-Wing on the swamp. Luke tries it, but Luke at this point is a little bitch, and he can't lift his X-Wing from the swamp. And he's like, this is stupid, I can't do it. Yoda tells him you have to feel the force around you, the energy that binds you and surrounds us. And at this point in my notes I put, okay, Yoda's getting better. He's more serious Yoda. This is the Yoda I like, not the creepy one. It's like, you will. It's like, all right, Yoda, relax, dude. So Yoda actually, Luke goes to sit down and he's kind of frustrated and he doesn't know what to do and he can't get off the planet. And Yoda that's when he uses the Force, and there's an amazing scene where he pulls out the X-Wing and it comes in from the swamp. And Luke is looking at it in awe and he's like, I can't believe this dude just did this. And Yoda says, and that is why you fail. So then we cut to Vader, who's choking out another dude. And right after he chokes him out, he says, apology accepted. Because before the guy was saying, like, oh, I'm sorry we lost the Falcon. He's like, I'll go apologize to Vader. The next scene we get is Vader, like, ending that dude. And he's like, oh, thank you for your apology, after the dude's already dead. And it turns out the Falcon is hiding on the Death Star. Excuse me, not the Death Star, the Star Destroyer. Genius. It's actually, like, blending in on the surface, and it's too small, and they're not going to scan their own ship, obviously, for like enemy ships. So Leia says, okay, Han, well, what's the next move here? Like, we can't just hide out in this thing forever. And Han says, well, if they follow standard Imperial procedure, they'll dump their garbage before jumping light speed, and we'll just float away. And that's funny because it's like, it's kind of like, okay, don't litter on the highway. It's like, so in this case, before you jump to light speed, why do you dump your garbage? Is it because you don't bring your garbage to another system? It's just a fun bit there, but then Han says, you know, we gotta find a spaceport, and he's like, oh, Lando. And she goes, who? She goes, what's Lando? He goes, Lando's not a system, he's a man. And he's like, we go way back. So eventually they do actually dump their trash there, and the Falcon kind of floats away before the Empire disappears. And there's a really cool scene where the music's playing and Leia says, you know, it's not very often, but she's like, you do have your moments. And then they kind of start going towards what we all see as Cloud City, where Lando is. But Boba Fett is all over that shit. And Boba Fett follows them right behind, and they don't notice this somehow. So Luke and Yoda are still training, and at this point I'm like, all right, we're spending a little bit too much time on Dagobah here. Like, it was a cool idea, now it's like just cutting back. Yoda says, you know, with the Force you can see the past and the future, but it's foggy, you can only see certain things, and you don't know exactly when they're going to happen. But it's a cool dive into the Force there, because he says, you know, I see a city in the clouds. And they're like, yeah, that's where your friends are. And Luke asks Yoda if they're going to die. Yoda says, you know, it's difficult to see. Always in motion the future is. Also kind of the idea that your presence affects the future, but this will at least give you some hindsight into what's going to happen. So we go back to the Falcon, arriving at Cloud City, and these are like all incredible shots. There's a really great scene in the cockpit. And we get, like, just everything in Cloud City is really, really amazing. It's almost like golden hour, or dusk, when they arrive there. And maybe Cloud City's always like that, but really beautiful art design. And these are like, once you get to Cloud City, it's like, it almost feels like a different movie. I feel like it's the best set piece so far, by far. So they're trying to land, and Han is kind of arguing with the guy. He's like, you know, like, I don't know if we're gonna let you land. And then eventually they're like, all right, you can land on this gate. So Han goes down there, and there's a great bit in the cockpit where Chewie says something in Wookiee, and Han says, you know, that was a long time ago. I'm sure he forgot about that. And he goes down, and Lando kind of, no one's there to meet them, and they're like, I don't know, this doesn't look good. And then the door opens, and Lando comes out with a crew. And he says, you know, you got a lot of nerve coming here. And why are you yawning so much? Lando says, you got a lot of nerve coming here. And then he kind of stares him down, and they don't know how he's going to react. And then he smiles, and he gives him a big hug, and he says, how are you old pirate? And Lando kind of hits on Leia, and he's like, my, who are you? And Han's like, all right, dude. He's like, let's keep going here. 3PO then wanders into like a side alleyway, and he just gets blown to smithereens because he's like, oh, is that an R2 unit? And then the door shuts behind him, and it turns out that's like where they decommission all the droids. So we go back to Yoda and Luke again, and he says, Yoda says, you must not go. Luke's like, they'll die if I don't go. And they say, you don't know that. And it's Obi-Wan and Yoda now talking to him. And Obi-Wan says, Luke, you will be tempted by the dark side. It is you and your abilities that the Emperor wants. And Luke says, Luke, I don't want to lose you like I lost Vader. And he says, don't give in to hate. That leads to the dark side. And Luke says, okay. He's like, I got it. And he's like, I will return here and finish my training. He's like, I promise. And that's when Obi-Wan says, that boy is our last hope. And Yoda says, no, there is another. And we're like, what? There's another? Who is that? Chewie ends up picking up all of the 3PO parts where he's like kind of wrestling with the guys trying to throw him into the furnace there, or the incinerator. And there's a brief scene where Han and Leia say that they don't trust Lando before Lando shows up. He says, I made a deal with the Empire to stay away from this place forever. And he's like, come with me. And then that's where Lando turns them into Vader immediately. He opens the door, and Vader's like sitting at the dinner table, like, yo, come on in to eat. Han shoots at him a couple times, and he just like deflects it, and then he uses the Force to take his blaster away, which is a cool scene. Boba Fett is here. He looks really badass. This is the coolest probably Boba Fett will be in Star Wars ever. And he doesn't even do much, but he looks really, really cool, and his armor looks awesome. So Lando says, I'm sorry, they arrived just before you did. I had no choice. Vader takes Han to torture him, and he tells Lando, Leia and Chewie can never leave Cloud City, but they'll stay here. And Lando's like, this deal is getting worse and worse all the time, and Boba just looks like a badass. So Lando reveals to Han and Leia, Vader's using them as bait for someone named Skywalker, and they're like, Luke, and they're like, yeah, he's trying to lure Luke here, and that's why he's using you guys. And then, hello, the carbon freezing chamber. This is like one of the most iconic scenes or set pieces in Star Wars history. They get to the carbon freezing chamber. Vader says, we're going to freeze Luke before we bring him to the Emperor, or so we can bring him to the Emperor. And Lando says, this isn't for humans, this is only for carbon. And Vader says, well, we'll test it with Captain Solo then. And then we get the scene where Leia finally admits, I love you, right before Han goes down there, and Chewie's like crying out, and Han just says, I know. And it's like, damn, that's a badass way to go out if that's his last line. There's something so beautiful about that line, and as Han's going down in the chamber, Chewie's like crying out, and then he's carbonated. And Lando goes down there, and he's like, he's got some like buttons there, and I don't know if he messes with any of them, but Vader is like, well, did he survive the thing? And Lando's like, yep, he's alive, and he's in perfect hibernation. And Vader says, okay, well now he's taking Leia and Chewie to his ship, and Lando's like, we didn't agree to that. And Vader says, I am altering the deal, and he goes, pray do not alter it any further. James Earl Jones is awesome as Vader. His voice is so good in any movie, but he is amazing as Vader here, and you can really feel like his presence. So Luke shows up. We get the cool scene of Boba walking by with the floating Han and the carbonite. Luke just happens to show up like right after that happened, and Luke eventually gets to the carbon chamber where Vader is waiting for him, and this is a really, really cool scene. He says, the Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are no Jedi Master yet. And then we cut back to Chewie, R2, Leia, and 3PO backpack, as I call them, the backpack edition, because Chewie's got him on his back. He hasn't put his legs back on yet. They don't have time to do that. But he's like, we'll get out of here and we'll fix you up. And they're trying to save Han, but Boba Fett takes him in his dope ass ship. Like at the last second, he flies away, and that's that. So then they got to fight their way through some stormtroopers. We cut back to Luke and Vader, where Luke's like, he's like, dude, I learned a lot. He's like, check these moves out. And because Vader's like, oh, impressive, impressive. He like jumps up to the pipes and he's like, yeah, you don't even know what Yoda taught me, bro. And so they eventually go to the lower level where Vader kind of does some Bush League moves, and he just starts throwing like random pipes and obstacles, excuse me, at Luke. And Luke is like slowly like swinging at them, like really late. Almost like when a fastball goes by a batter and it's like in the glove and then they like swing at it. And it's like, is Luke just exhausted here? Or more importantly, it's probably because he hasn't finished his training, so he doesn't know exactly how to be a Jedi Master yet. So it's cool to see his progression from the first movie where he did not do anything. This one he's getting better, but he's going against Vader, who's like the baddest dude, and he can't quite hold his own just yet. So he gets like kind of blown out of his airlock, and Luke goes flying back, and he's holding on for dear life on this bridge here. But before we get to the end of that, it cuts back to what I like to call the backpack crew on Leia, 3PO, Chewie, and Lando. They're fighting with some stormtroopers there. Eventually they get back to the Falcon and they take off. So then we get Luke and Vader, who are now on like the iconic bridge. And Vader takes out Luke's right arm eventually, and he's got a saber in there, so those both go tumbling down into like the huge abyss below. And Luke's like, and then Vader's like, you just admit it, you've lost. And he goes, Luke, you do not yet understand your importance. Join me and we can rule. Luke's like, I'll never join you. And then there's that great scene where he's like, if you only knew the power of the dark side. And he says, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. And Luke is like slowly skirting back towards like the very, very end, because he doesn't really know what to do, but there's nowhere to go here. Luke is trapped. And he says, he told me enough. He told me that you killed him. And then this is when we get the line where Vader says, no, I am your father. And I can't even imagine this spoiler. Everyone knows this. Obviously, this is like probably the most iconic plot twist in movie history. But I can't imagine at the time going to the theater and being like, what? You are Luke's father? Like, because we all know, of course, and if you're like me, you probably knew the twist before even watching Empire or even watching New Hope for the first time. But it's like, I can't imagine going to the theater for the first time and seeing that movie and being like, dude, did you see Empire this weekend? Like, there's a big twist. Like, he's the father. And so that's a cool line. And Luke says, no, that's not true. That's impossible. Vader says, search your feelings. You know it to be true. And he kind of takes what the Emperor said to him back at Luke. And so there's kind of like this Force thing where Luke does know it. So even though it's a crazy amount of information and a crazy reveal, Luke doesn't question it because he knows that you're right. Like, I don't have to question you. I know you telling me that because we have this Force connection that I believe you are my father. And Vader says one more time, join me, we can rule the galaxy as father and son. Luke looks down and he just jumps conveniently onto like an air duct. And this is a long drop. I don't know how he could have possibly seen like oh, if I jump at that angle, but he didn't really have any other options, and he thought it was so bad to join Vader that he was like, I would rather jump to maybe my death or try and like a last ditch hope to escape. So he jumps down there, he falls through like a shaft. And then he's literally hanging on like the final pole of Cloud City. We get this amazing shot. Hanging on for his dear life. Him and Leia have a Force moment, which is interesting because we don't know about Leia. And Leia knows exactly where Luke is, but that shows their connection. And this is the first time we kind of see Leia use the Force at all. And so we're like, why is she connected with Luke? But we'll find out more about that, obviously, even in the next movie. So she's like, I know where to go. We gotta go pick up Luke. And Lando and Chewie are in the cockpit, baby. So they have a Force moment, and Leia knows exactly where Luke is. They go and they're like, oh, it's Luke. And they go like right underneath there. Luke drops into the Falcon. and it seems like all is well, but they're not out of the hot seat yet because there's some TIE fighters on their tail, and they're like, all right, we got to jump to light speed. And they're like, okay, you guys fixed light speed, right? And he's like, yep. And they go, all right, and they kick it, and it doesn't work. And Lando's like, they told me they fixed it. He's like, it's not my fault. And then we get a great cut to Vader on the Star Destroyer, and he's like, you guys did take out the hyperdrive, right? And they're like, yep, we did. And it's like, so the Empire took out the hyperdrive. Smart move, probably because last time they jumped to hyperspeed, they had to track them down. They're like, don't fool us again. But then it's revealed here that R2-D2 at some point hacked into like the Imperial system, so he knows how to fix the hyperdrive. And then so he just goes over and like hits something, and it fixes it. They jump to hyperspeed. Vader and the Star Destroyer. This is really cool too because, sorry to backtrack here, they say like the tractor beam is just about in range, and they're about to pull in the Falcon, similar to the beginning of New Hope where that ship is pulled in, and they board it. They're about to do that, and that's when R2 fixes it. So right when they're like ready to be like, this is it, Luke, like come with me, they go away into hyperspeed. So we then get Luke getting a new hand, like a fake hand here, and that's when Lando and Chewie take off in the Falcon. They say they're going to go find Jabba and Boba, and they'll meet you at the rendezvous point on Tatooine. And Luke says, good to go, may the Force be with you, and they head out. There's like a great shot at the end here with like 3PO, R2-D2, Luke, and Leia. And that's Empire Strikes Back. Alright, so my award for The Force was strong with this one for the favorite actor. It's going to be James Earl Jones in this movie as Darth Vader. It's got to be Vader. This movie is all about Vader, and he is so good in the whole trilogy. But this movie is The Empire Strikes Back. This is Vader getting revenge, and we see at the end of New Hope where Vader spins away, and he's like, I'll get you. And this time Vader, like, he's like, yo, I got some stuff and we're gonna mess you up. And Vader kind of has the upper hand from the very beginning here, and you know, he pulls the switch in Cloud City, and the rebels still manage to get away. Luke and Leia manage to get away for the moment, but Vader's on their tail, and he's like, I'm gonna stop at nothing to track you down. So we really feel his presence here, and James Earl Jones' voice is so perfect for Vader. And even though we never see at this point just more than the back of his helmet, that suit is so iconic, and he's just so good in every scene that he commands the room. And James Earl Jones, I think, just stands out the most, and he deserves the award. Okay, so for score, so this one is tough, and I think I'm going to shock a lot of people here. I'm going to give it a 9.2, and you're saying 9.2, that's a pretty good score, but didn't you put New Hope higher? I did. I gave New Hope a 9.6. I know a lot of people think this movie is the best Star Wars movie ever made, and a lot of people think that it's way better than Hope or Jedi or any of the new movies, certainly better than the prequels. This is not a bad movie by any means, but I always think that Empire is a little too overhyped, and I think this movie, although it's really good, I think it is filled with a lot of cool moments, but I think rewatching this, and especially putting like a magnifying glass on it, I think they spend too much time on Dagobah, and Dagobah is really cool. I love the aesthetic of Dagobah, but like they spend too much time. Luke and Yoda are on that planet for way too long. It's really just the Hoth fight. They go to Dagobah, and then they go to Cloud City, and really those are the three locations for the whole movie. And they're great locations, but the Hoth fight is cool, but that one too a little overhyped because Vader gets there. He doesn't even fight anyone at the end. They escape, and Vader's kind of chasing them through this whole movie. So that part I do like, but I thought the Dagobah stuff really, really cool, but I would have liked it if it was shorter. And just, this movie is not a bad movie by any means, but again, a 9.2 is nothing to scoff at. But I think A New Hope just does a better job of telling a better overall complete story. And I know this is a sequel to New Hope, so they don't necessarily need to lay down the foundation. But New Hope just kind of has that magic. I don't know. This is a great movie and a great action movie, and almost a bit of like a suspense, not a thriller, but there's some suspense in here too. But A New Hope, I think it just has the moments where I remember so many moments from A New Hope as being like iconic, magical, my childhood. Empire, you remember the big scenes, and there's some, again, a lot of really cool moments, but I just think A New Hope is just a little bit better, and I think it's a better movie in my opinion. So hopefully all of the Star Wars fans aren't going to come chasing me with pitchforks here. I am wearing my Vader shirt. This suit cost me an arm and a leg, so Vader is amazing, and again, he's awesome in this movie. He was also awesome in New Hope, but yeah, 9.2, still a very respectable score. Yeah. Okay, and as you saw there, the rankings as they stand right now, number 1 is A New Hope, and number 2, The Empire Strikes Back. This will build and build, and we'll see how this goes. I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to agree with A New Hope being better than Empire, but I do know people make the argument for that, and again, these are my rankings, this is my review, so it's okay to disagree with me, and just remember, we can have differing opinions and still like the same franchise or still love the same franchise. So I hope you guys had a good time checking out this review. Thank you again for joining me for episode 2. I can't really use episodes for these ones because there's actual episodes. Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Episode 2 of the show, the review you've been looking for. Please like that, like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell notification so you know when I post new videos. And again, not to self-promote here, but please go check out Mr. Robot in review. Please go check out Wick Watch. Go check out New Hope for this series. And until next time, may the Force be with you.